Welcome back to another episode of Survival Worldwide. We're sitting here in the studio today with the latest voted out castaway for Survivor South Africa Immunity Island. Kian, this is a sad moment for me because you were a part of my draft team. I lose you here just before the merge, and this one hurts.
I know.
How are you doing?
I'm well. I mean, obviously, watching the episode is reliving those kind of like moments again. Very emotional, very vulnerable moments, which I've always said I'm not afraid to show my vulnerability, and a lot of tears happening over there in my episode.
100%. And, I guess before we go straight into the episode, I want to sort of find out what's been happening in your life since it's happened. Whereabouts are you? Because I'm pretty sure people would be interested to know if you're still in South Africa at the moment or if you're living somewhere else. One of the things for me that was quite interesting about you was the fact that you've been living on and off between Hong Kong and South Africa, for instance. And, I could relate to that in a little bit because I thought to myself, like, hey, if I was an expat that went back to go play the game, how would I fit in with the people that live in South Africa every day? So whereabouts are you at the moment? And did that affect your game, sort of being someone that kind of lives, you've got one foot in Hong Kong and one foot in South Africa at times?
I'm currently in Hong Kong at the moment, and I did indeed fly back to South Africa for the game. Literally got the phone call from LaRue on Monday, 7 p.m. I was in Taiwan at that time, and in less than 6 days, Sunday afternoon, I was in Cape Town. So it was just like, got the phone call. Lulu was like, you want to come back? Are you in? I'm like, oh yes, hell yes. You don't enter Survivor and when they tell you, yeah, you're one of the castaways and not fly back for it. So there was no ways I was going to miss it. I was actually living in South Africa during the time when I first applied to get onto the show. So that was early 2020. And obviously lockdown happened and we were literally about to kind of go. At that time, end of March, I didn't know if I was a part of the show yet. But as the show was about to go ahead, the President Ramaphosa kind of like, placed down the lockdown and the show was postponed indefinitely. And that is when actually I flew back to Taiwan because I was in the film industry back then and all productions kind of just went on a halt. So there was no work. So I went back to Taiwan and then I got the call to go into, to get onto the island in October, flew back for it. And then I'm still kind of a bit of like a modern day nomad. I don't really have a home. So I've been flying between Taiwan, Hong Kong, bit of South Africa. I traveled a little bit. I went to Dubai. So absolutely not living in a COVID world for me. I'm still traveling, but just the only thing that's different is that I've been doing a lot of quarantines. So yeah.
I can imagine. Well, how do you feel it sort of, I guess you lived in South Africa, you grew up in South Africa for most of your life, so you can kind of relate to the culture of South Africa and how people communicate on a daily basis. Do you feel like it had a massive effect on your game, having lived abroad for a bit, coming back into a show like Survivor South Africa? And also with that, what was it like to represent such a minority within South Africa as the Asian South African ethnicity within South Africa? It's quite a minority and people might not be aware of that if they're not from South Africa.
Well, first of all, Asians represent. I grew up, I've always said to people that I feel so blessed to have been able to grow up in South Africa. And funny enough, actually, when I first went to South Africa, I wasn't kind of staying at home because my parents, they were busy with starting up their business and I didn't know a single word of English. So I actually grew up with a lot of Afrikaans influence in my life because I was sent to an Afrikaans home where Danny Erika and Wim Api, they were actually helping me with my homework after school and I stayed with them from Monday to Friday. They used to take me around in the caravan. We'd go to Free State. So I wouldn't say that I felt like a complete outcast and actually in terms of culturally that I didn't fit in. I definitely felt like I was a part of it. I'm very South African. Whenever people ask me where I'm from, I say South Africa, despite having to have lived abroad. And I think my South African accent is a little bit screwed up. But I've always been very proud to be Asian South African. And actually, Asians has been in South Africa for a while. I mean, we've been there a few hundred years. Historically, I think, if I'm correct, Asians were actually employed to actually teach the South Africans how to farm in terms of agriculture, back in the, I think, late 1800, 1900. I might be wrong, but so we've been around for a long time, and there's a lot of Asians who are kind of like second or third generation Asians in South Africa. And I do feel, I mean, this is kind of like from a personal point of view, where I feel like there isn't enough Asian representation in South Africa in terms of media, a voice for the Asians, because I personally feel very proud to be South African. And, I've always said, like, I would love to be able to kind of be a voice for the Asians in South Africa. And especially with this current global climate with the Asian hate around. So it's very easy to be misunderstood when people don't know about you. I think in any environment, whether in the real world or inside Survivor. So I guess for me, if I'm going to tie it back to kind of being in a game, where I kind of was constantly especially from the beginning when I had a really, really shaky start. And I feel like when people don't actually take the time to get to know someone, it's really difficult to actually build that bond and build relationships. So it was a lot of work that I had to do after episode 1.
Yes. And I wanted to ask you about that. So obviously that's one of the big moments that we see in episode 1, yourself and Sean working together and looking through the food to find potentially a hidden immunity idol. Was Sean someone that you naturally gravitated to early in the game and you thought you could work with him further in the game down the line? Because obviously you guys got split up early in the game as well, which was another bit of a potential disadvantage there if he was someone that you thought you could work with.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think Sean is somebody that I definitely did felt like I resonated with, and that I felt like we could work together. And also, he is also kind of like quite a chaotic person, not Dino type paranoia chaotic, but he is quite a bit over the place. But I do felt like that could actually potentially work to my advantage, because I'm not somebody who is chaotic. I may be very quiet because a lot of times I am doing thinking and observations. I don't know if you picked up in tribal councils, I always have these like facial expressions, just thinking, and listening into what people are saying to see if there are actually stories I can pick out from what they are, with the meanings they are trying to convey behind what they're saying. So for example, when you mentioned on Twitter that it's quite interesting that I knew where to vote for that first episode with Jason. Sorry.
So that's fine. Have a bit of water. So just for those that are listening, basically on Twitter after the first episode, I tweeted that it was interesting to see that even though Sean ended up voting for Kian to try and save himself in that spot, obviously Kian ended up voting for the correct person in Jason Brookstein. So I thought maybe you had an in there with the rest of your tribe, or you got some information. So clear the air on that. How did you sort of put 2 and 2 together and know how to vote for Jason in that spot?
I remember just sitting there and just listening to what Jason was saying, what everyone else was saying. And there was a moment where Jason said, say something about the fact that he trusted Sean, therefore he trusted me, but he didn't. I can't remember. Jeez, it was so long ago. But I remember I had like
fair enough, but you picked it up in the conversation, so I assumed that the vibe was there.
I had an epiphany. I was like, oh my God, this guy is throwing me under the bus. There's something not lacquer over here. And that's the moment where I say, this guy I cannot trust. And obviously even if it's me going home tonight, I'm writing his name down because he lied. But anyways, I mean, that's in the past. And so this is kind of how I was my operations during my time, when if you don't see me talking, there's a lot of thinking going on my mind, and just observing, because you really got to observe some, because actions don't necessarily match up to people's words. So yeah.
So a question that I had for you on that specific part of the game before we move into the first swap tribe. Amy was the person who outed you and Sean when you were looking through the rice for the immunity idol. Were you guys aware that Amy was that person? Did that information make its way back to you guys at all, or were you unsure as to how that information got through to the rest of the tribe?
Well, first of all, we weren't actually looking for immunity idol. Potentially it could be there, but we were quite open and honest about the fact that we were looking for Flint, which is actually for the tribe. I mentioned that at tribal council, and very openly, everyone else was busy building shelter on the other side, and we kind of just took the bags of pup and rice, and we were digging in front of everyone, definitely not hiding. And then obviously Amy came along. We didn't really, personally, I didn't really think too much of the scenario, but I personally at that point knew that Amy, there's obviously the Spice Girls kind of like trio going on over there with Amy, Nicole, and Marisha, and I knew that at that moment they're not people that I would be working with, because I kind of fell in with Sean, Dino, Jason, in that crowd. I was really hoping that's where I could cement myself in an alliance, you know. So no, definitely did not think that it was Amy that threw my name out there. I thought maybe it was Jason, because obviously listening in on the conversations. So to say I was blindsided, I can't say that, because obviously I knew that my name or Jason or Sean, and hence why there was that kind of like big cry, tear, dramatic moment from me and Sean giving me a hug. I would have liked going forward to have Sean as an ally, but unfortunately now we're going into the next part of my journey, is that we got split up with the first tribe swap, which I think was a saving grace for me, because I was at the bottom.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to ask you next. So you get into Vuna 2.0, you're split up and you end up there, and Teresa is someone that sort of notices, or she gets a bit of screen time here saying, and I'm sure you were aware of it, like you mentioned, you already knew where the dynamics were, that yourself, Teresa, and Dino are in the bottom of that group. So it was a bit of a saving grace here. Did you at any point try and work with Tyson and Kinan and Inesu at any stage, or was this more of an opportunity for you to try and re-establish your bonds with the Spice Girl Alliance, as you've sort of named them in this specific podcast?
Definitely, I think, as I said, it was a saving grace, and because Vuna kept on winning, it afforded me the opportunity to get to know them better and create a bond. And I felt like Vuna 2.0 in general, we had a good thing going. It was very kumbaya in camp, because we kept on winning. We were getting fed, we were eating. Obviously, the closer bonds were the original Zamba 1.0, but we weren't kind of like disregarding the fact that Kieran, Tyson, and Nesu is also a part of the game, and there is merge to think about, and we can't completely disregard anyone in the game, because the game is so fluid and you got to be so adaptable. You just don't know what kind of twists and turns the survivor guys are going to throw at you. So you can't completely say, oh, you know what, I'm definitely not going to work with this person. It's just not doable in Survivor, because you don't know your best ally, your number ones and your number twos, not that I had any during my time, could be voted out at any second. So you still need to have bonds with all the other people that's a part of the game. So I wouldn't say that Anesu, Kieran, and Tyson were out. I personally felt very much, I liked them. I really did enjoy the company. I maybe was a bit naive to believe, and also maybe got a little bit too comfortable with where I was within the tribe to think that we would all be going into merge together until the second swap came along. I managed to actually claw my way back up into the group and rebuild my relationships. See, that's a thing with Survivor, right? At one side of the tribe, of a camp, you can be enemies. But if you're going into a twist and a turn and going into a new tribe, you suddenly realize, oh, wow, these people that I once couldn't work with or who once wanted me out can now be potentially my closest allies, So we can completely say, oh, just because what have happened in the past, I'm going to take it forward and actually hold a grudge against anyone. So, yeah.
100%. So I wanted to ask you, prior to going into Zumba 3.0, does get confusing after a while. I'm really happy they got those little icons at the bottom for the swap tribe, so we know who was in what tribe. Prior to the swap, you had a moment there with Tyson where you gave him a bit of information in regards to where the votes were going to go prior to that vote that Teresa ended up getting voted out in. What sort of happened there? What didn't we see? And obviously we see you sort of thinking, oops, I messed up here. I gave information I shouldn't have given. Talk us through a little bit of what happened there specifically from your end.
Definitely a oopsie, but also I think in a way it helped the game because it flushed out Tyson's idol, which we had suspicions that he had because of the exchange of information from Paul to Tyson during the sandpit battle out, which Dino pointed out. So I think the oopsie happened because we were all talking about, okay, potentially, so what's going to happen? Is it going to be Tyson? Because we are trying to kind of pick out the Venus OGs one by one, or potentially it could be Teresa, because Teresa has never fully integrated into I think post Zumba 1.0, she never fully integrated into the alliance, although we did try very hard. She was part of Zamba 1.0, so we did have that kind of sentiment that we started off this game together. So definitely an oopsie that wasn't intentionally to happen, but I think it did aided the outcome of that tribal council. One, to send Teresa home, and two, to flush Tyson's idol, and three, potentially, if both of them have idols, Kieran being a contingency plan, he goes home, which also kind of was our initial objective, is to get one of the Venus out. So, yeah.
Okay, so another question that I have, sort of talking to Dino last week, obviously, he mentioned that he believed that you climbed ahead of him in the picking order in that alliance, and he actually thought he was behind you in that picking order. So the swap happens here, and you get into Zumba 3.0, but yet you remain in that tribe, and Dino is voted out instead of you in that spot. How did that happen? What did you do behind the scenes, and why do you believe that they didn't see that you potentially were more important to Reyn and Marisha and Nicole? Because that was Dino's sort of view of the game. Do you agree with that? And sort of where did you sort of work your magic behind the scenes? Because obviously there were certain parts in the game that we didn't see what you were doing behind the scenes on the edit.
Like I mentioned, I was grateful for the opportunity to rebuild my kind of relationships with the Zamba 1.0 at Luna, and I guess maybe because I was a lot more consistent, and also I was the cook. I don't know if you remember that Tyson and Teresa were speaking in Xhosa that moment, and mentioned the cook in that language. And so I guess being the provider, feeding everyone. And one of the biggest things for me was actually, how can I contribute to the tribe to ensure that we are winning challenges? And one of the biggest things is making sure that everyone's getting fed. We need to eat, to have sustenance in order to fight those challenges, the immunity challenges. And I guess that way, my contribution, being the provider, the cook, maybe have, kind of like allowed me to draw myself in within the alliance. And in general, instead of what is seen on episode 7 of me being a very selfish person taking the snacks, I'm a Cancerian, so like I'm naturally a nurturer. I look after people, I care about people. So I think that is why to them I potentially have closest. That's how I potentially drew myself into the Vuna 2.0 alliance. Yeah.
Okay, so a question that I have around that, you mentioned the food and eating. Obviously, on the episode, it looks like you're not sharing, you're eating on your own, and all that kind of thing. What was the thinking behind that? Did you know that? Listen, you were fighting an uphill battle at that stage, and you might as well eat if you're going to be sent home. Or what was your thinking in that specific scenario? It obviously doesn't look good on the TV show, but for everybody listening to this, I think we've got pretty educated audience that follows these podcasts. They know that we see an edited show, and we only see a little bit of what happens on each 3 days within a period of about 50 minutes on a TV show. Talk us through a little bit of what happened at that spot.
Well, I think at that moment in time, I was so emotionally butchered that, seeing Dino going home, and I was just thinking to myself, well, I'm most probably next, because if they're trying to get rid of Anela, but Anela kept on getting sent to Immunity Island, and then there's Santoni, who isn't as physically strong as others. I mean, we were already at a disadvantage. If you're looking at, the new Vuna 3.0, they're an entire kind of like swimming team and rugby team, everything going on over there. And in my mind, I was thinking that if I don't eat and I can't perform at immunity challenges, I might become a liability to the tribe. And I don't want to be a liability to the tribe. I wanted to be able to give us the best fighting chance. But obviously, being so emotionally butchered, you weren't thinking straight. And that, at that moment, I was thinking, oh, I'm thinking for the tribe. But to people who haven't been eating, like Wada and Santoni, they're thinking, oh my goodness, we haven't been eating, and how dare she? The audacity of her to kind of eat in front of us. This all boils down to obviously communication. Obviously, I at that stage didn't get to speak to Wada and Santoni as much. So I really feel bad. I mean, like I feel bad for at that moment making them feel that way when it wasn't my intention. And Tyson and Kinan wouldn't have felt it as much because they've been eating with us at Vuna, and it's just Survivor does things to you when you're so emotionally taxed that you just didn't think that much. Yeah.
Another really important question that I wanted to ask you, you touched on Anela being sent to Immunity Island quite a few times. In this episode, we see you mouthing or wording to Marisha and Nicole to save you, and they end up not saving you, and you kind of make a very interesting observation in one of your confessionals here, saying that Reyn is clearly running things on that side because he wanted to save Anela, and I think that becomes a part of your defense and trying to put more of a target on Anela later on in the episode as well. What was your thoughts of Reyn in the early stages? Were you aware that he was playing the type of game that he is playing? And if not, who are you the most impressed by, I guess, watching the TV show now after seeing the edited version of it? Who have you been really impressed by and the way that they're playing the game so far?
I've always known that Reyn and Anela had a good kind of like brotherhood relationship going on, starting at Zamba 1.0. They were brothers from day one. So I kind of was hoping that the relationship I had built with them in Vuna 2.0 would have actually helped me to send them to send me to Immunity Island instead of Anela. But I guess in this game that they felt that Anela was a safer bet for them going forward for the game, because obviously we knew that merge was going to happen very, very soon. And they are thinking about the game ahead, who would be a safer vote for them, people who they've been in alliance with from day one or somebody who came in afterwards. It's not to say that what gameplay is right or incorrect. For me, my game is very fluid. I've said, you know, I was born to be like water, and in deep oceans I thrive. I think I did manage to thrive because of, obviously, we'll talk more about my ending, how my tribal council ended. But you got to be adaptable. And for me, you know, being able to be adaptable is being able to kind of go from the very bottom of the tribe at Zamba 1.0, and then being resilient to bring myself back up and say, okay, that's in the past. You've got a new opportunity now to actually claw yourself back in there and climb back up the ladder. And that's what I did. But unfortunately, that was still not strong enough for them to send me to Immunity Island over Anela, as Anela is a safer bet for them, I guess. I would have loved to go.
Yes, it would have been amazing if they shared the love, but I do think if that happened, I would have been talking to Anela in this spot in any case, because they knew they needed to get somebody from that original Zamba tribe moving into the merge, and I do think that it was a good move on their part. Sadly, it means I'm talking to you in this spot, but it's kind of like, you know, Zamba had numbers at this stage in the game, and I think it would have been either yourself or Anela in this spot, and it sadly ended up being you. But you mentioned that at the end of the game, you didn't go down without a fight. We see you get quite emotional, and because you came to the realization that you're just not meeting that next milestone, which is to make the merge. I'm assuming you're a big fan of the show, because only a big fan of the show can get that passionate about not being able to make that milestone. And what I wanted to ask you is that tribal council is quite confusing, because it does look, according to the way that it's edited, that you're continuing to put a really big target on Anela and backing the rest of the group there, which I didn't fully understand, because Anela at this point is immune and he can't be voted out. Did you try and shift the target onto a Santoni at any stage, or was the relationship between you and Santoni of such a sort of way that you didn't want to target her or try and go against her at this point?
I don't know if you recall seeing Wada and I speaking. We had a moment of talk, and Santoni was kind of like paranoid. She's like, you know, why is she speaking to everyone? And Kieran said, well, she has to speak to everyone. So my argument is that, you know, if Anela is immune and it's either Santoni or I. Santoni or I, and Wada had a hit list. So she was saying, well, Anela's got to go. Santoni's got to go, because obviously Anela just tipped her off in the wrong way by voting Carla off and trying to target her. And then Santoni being a double agent, somebody who is not trustworthy. But then again, if you want to go back to the immunity challenge, you can see that Wada and Santoni had a very big bonding moment where Wada actually helped Santoni, who was petrified of the water, helped her through the challenge. And I guess that was kind of like a turning point where I went from having an opportunity to stay and then completely taken away from me because of the bond that they created. How do I put this? I was trying to say to them that if I'm being kept, they have a greater opportunity to go further in the game, because there's Anela, who's gone to Immunity Island twice. He's got advantages, right, which he might use against them by picking them off one by one. So there is Anela, Chappies, Reyn, Sean, Amy, and Santoni. That will be 6 of them if Santoni stays. And then versus, plus Anela's got advantages. And then there is Marisha, Nicole, Wada, Anesu, Tyson, and Kinan. 6 versus 6. If they're going to go into a merge and, you know, someone's got to get voted off and Anela has an advantage, you know, eventually the people on the right-hand side, which is the Vuna OG with some of those Vuna 2.0, they're going to start getting picked up one by one. So that was kind of like my argument with them on that point.
Okay, so sort of to close it off here, what was your favorite moment in the game that you remember? I know that obviously we could talk a lot more, but I know you've got a pretty busy day ahead of you. Just want to know what your favorite moment was in the game, and also what is next for you. This is your opportunity to plug yourself. I'll make sure to put all of your social handles onto the description of the video as well, like Twitter and Instagram and things like that. But anything else that you would like people to follow you on?
Okay, so my favorite moment on the game must have been definitely winning that first immunity challenge for Zamba 1.0, because that was the turning point, and that was kind of like, that was a moment where for me going into game, I've always wanted to go under the radar. I didn't want to overshine. I just kind of want to be quietly waiting for merge, hopefully, which seemed like I was going to get there, and so. Going from Zamba 1.0, the next immunity challenge, I knew I needed to step up, and it was so incredible to feel that win and to know that I'm not going home. So that, I guess that must have been the best moment, yeah, during my game.
Awesome. And what's next for you?
Well, what's next for me? I'm going to continue to do my things that I do. I'm currently in Hong Kong, and I don't know where I'm going to go next, but I hope that I'll get to continue to do crazy things like firefighting somewhere out in the world, and climb up mountains, and the sky's the limit. So I just can't. I'm very excited, and I do feel that I haven't had a full run on Survivor. I hadn't, because of my gameplay, I wasn't shared a lot. And I do hope and pray that maybe there is an opportunity for me to actually go in and actually go hard at it, change up my strategy just a little bit.
I would love to see it. Kian, thank you very much for coming onto the show to talk about your time on the game. We wish you all the best for the future. From one fan to another, you lived my dream and you were out there to play it. It's awesome. We love to see it. And I hope to stay in touch. If you ever want to come and travel over to Australia or New Zealand, let me know. I'm in both of those countries quite a bit. And I'll be sure to show you around. I've seen some great photos on Instagram of you hiking some really cool mountains and things like that. There's a lot of it over in Australia and New Zealand as well. So we'll definitely stay in touch.
Well, there is never, if you look at Dino, he applied 3, 4, 5 times, there's never say never. Maybe I'll see you on Survivor.
Don't put any targets out there. All right, thanks. It's great talking to you. And guys, we'll be back next week to talk to the next person who was also voted out of the game. Thanks, Kian, and all the best with the rest of the interviews today.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Ciao.